So let me start with the good news. The first item on the good news is that we are here. Can you believe it? Had we not been here, we would not have received this very, very good news. The reality is that allegedly for the last 17 years, we have come together to ponder the real issues of our continent as far as mental health every single year. That is only partly true. As Dr. Mutiso will tell you, since 1998, when we were challenged by Norman Sartorius to meet at the cute countries, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, every single year, initially in Nairobi, Ethiopia, sometimes South Africa, Dar es Salaam, Kampala, we have held scientific meetings every year. The reason this is the 17th meeting is because of something Kenyans call divorce. All right, we divorced ourselves when we grew up, and now the Kenyans have their own meetings, Tanzanians have their own, Ugandans have their own, Ethiopians have their own, but in reality, we have met every year for the last 27. Makofi tafadhalini. The second thing, whether you're one-term or two-term person, doesn't matter. The truth is, we are people of order. We are people of order because since the beginning of time, with Kina Harun Arap Mengech, myself, Zamgatere, Okonji, Tiso, Tugona, our transitions have been peaceful and orderly. And I think that speaks to, it's now a tradition that cannot be breached, that Kenyan psychiatrists are orderly people. And I look yonder and I see beyond time and I see this tradition continue. That can only be good news. We met with IAPTA people, and with the greatest possible respect, I must tell you, you are the lowest ranking members of the psychiatric community, the very lowest. However, that is also a good thing, because now you have many mentors, all right? You have mentors now in KPA. And when you have done with the presidency of KPA, like our brother here, Chitai, has done, you are elevated by time and circumstances to the African Association of Psychiatrists. And after that, as has happened umpteen times, you ascend to an even higher level, which is the World Psychiatric Association. So you low-lying brothers and sisters, don't worry, because the future is very bright for you. Another piece of good news is the youth bulge inside psychiatry. When Mutiso was president, when Okonjo was president or myself, our meetings were little. And that is why we needed Jaza, Beba, Beba from Tanzania, Uganda, and so on. Now, because of the youth bulge, we can conduct our own meetings. And soon, we will be able to do regional meetings. That is a good thing. The other piece of good news, impende msipende, the public awareness about and around mental health in this, our republic, is very high. Anybody who doesn't know the importance of mental health in this country is either not born or is dead already. So all of us know, and it's going up. And one day, if I'm invited, I will tell you my thoughts at how we have arrived at this piece of good news. And finally, the legislative issues that you're all aware of are really very, very important indeed. I have listed there more good news. We are systematic. We didn't just dive into this world and start swimming. We asked ourselves first, what is the problem? And between our president, Lukoya, Tuoli, where is Lynette Ongeri, who are the other task force members? Yes, Uko Nyuma, yes. We literally burned the midnight oil, always drinking only water, and drew a roadmap, yeah, to this day. So all these things that you're seeing here are not accidental. They are the product of careful planning. I want to tell you how small you are, because it's sometimes useful to know how little and almost insignificant in terms of time scale you are. The first big event that occurred on this African continent was the Great Rift Valley, 25 million years ago. 13 billion years earlier, the Big Bang had happened. But the thing about the Rift Valley is that it created savannas. And when the savanna was created in the Rift Valley, it enabled us to come down from the trees. And when we came down from the trees, a number of things started happening to us. Like, for example, we became upright citizens, bifocal vision and so on. Homo sapiens, in terms of time, we are little, only 300,000 years ago. Before that, we were roaming, I don't know, Tangatangari all over Europe, Neanderthals, and other things, bure completely. Big brains, useless brains. Then something really dramatic happened. We discovered how to tame fire. And if you really are a developmental psychologist, you really want to understand what fire did for us. The taming of fire enabled us to broaden the scope of our diet. When we lived as hunter-gatherers, the only source of energy we had were ripe fruits. Suddenly, one day, we could tame fire, we could eat potatoes, we could eat ugali, we could eat chapati, we could eat complex carbohydrates. And so the sources of energy for humankind became enormous. And what did that do? The most energy consuming organ in your body is what? The brain. It weighs 2% of your body weight. It consumes 20% of your energy. So with that one act of discovering how to cook food, our diet changed. Our intestines actually gradually became smaller and smaller. Our jaws became less and less long, like chimpanzees. And the fire is what really fired us into where, and that's only 300,000 years ago. Fast forward, two things happened. Around 3,500 years ago, we started writing. And that truly is the beginning of human history. Because before that, we have depended almost exclusively on archaeological findings. A big accident occurred, a huge accident, a mutation. A mutation in the human body occurred around 70,000 years ago. And that is really the beginning of you. Because with that mutation, we develop language. You've been told the importance of gossip. Before 70,000 years ago, before this mutation, we didn't have abstract thinking. We couldn't think abstractly. Everything was he mbuzi, he ng'ombe, that's all we knew. Ideas of God and ghosts and other things did not exist in ourselves. 70,000 years ago, approximately, is a very momentous moment in the evolution of ourselves. So we developed things called shared myths. With the greatest respect to our Muslim and Christian brothers, this is when we discovered God. Some people say that's when God was created, in the minds of man. Because now we could think abstractly about a future that was not seen. We entered into a situation where a piece of paper like this could represent food for myself. Imagine telling a chimpanzee that this piece of paper is better than a banana. Those are the ones that are called shared myths. And then suddenly, On account of another confluence of factors, movement of winds across the Mediterranean, from the Sahara Desert, the seasonal rains from Turkey mainly, the rivers Tigris and Euphrates created what is called the Fertile Crescent. And the Fertile Crescent is basically the eastern part of the Mediterranean. And that's why we settled. So when you wonder, why is it that agriculture started there? It's not because we were very, very clever. It's a conspiracy between winds and rivers that gave us the possibility. The oldest city in the world is still Jericho, and it's a new city. Jericho is only about 10,000 years ago. And then our very own Jesus Christ dates back about 2000. Now, not to be outdone, we have our own little heroes, like Mr. Jomo. Yeah? And then came our very own colonial powers. And in their wish to distinguish the Akamba people from the Kikuyu people, they used scientific methods. So the Kikuyu, it was said, this tribe has lived on the edge of the forest and is prone to attacks from people from the breed. The Akamba, however, on account of having lived in more open and unforested areas, are completely different. This is science. They have more music, Mutiso. They have more music. That is science. I've seen and heard a lot of us make complaint about Gen Z. Gen Z, Gen Z, Gen Z. There is no revolution in the world that has been led by an old man like me. I am completely useless when it comes to leading. So all these Kenyan heroes, including Katili Wamenza, Koilel, Arab Somoe, Nabongo Mumia, all this, when you look back at their history, did what the Kenyan Gen Z is doing today, took ownership of their own future. In my very own lifetime, I was alive when Karothas made these statements. Karothas would have us believe that the Africans make very little use of his frontal lobes because it's not a good idea to use his frontal lobes. And he published this paper which held the view that the likeness existing between the normal African native and the lobotomized European is strikingly similar. That was the published science of the day. Our very own Elijah Masinde was diagnosed with a disease called religious mania. This is science. All right? These are not lay people. These are published paper. And according to Karothas, this poor boy who had religious mania, his prognosis was poor because he was never ever going to recover from the wish to be free. So that is by way of background and by way of describing how things change. They change by accident, by way of mutation. They change because of geographical events, rains and forests and that sort of thing. I was asked to do a keynote address, and I really got confused when I was told that I would have to speak at the end. Because really a keynote address comes first. It's a musical note that sets the pace and direction of a conference. So the way I'm going to do this is I will change it and say, this is not a conference that I'm a keynote speaker at. It is the rest of the year, so that each one of you can take home an important message that you will work on for the rest of the year. And it is my hope, as in the definition, that one or two will be informed, some of you will be captivated, some of you will be inspired. Now, when I was in school, just after the war, people say, the community health we did was about shifting people from asylums into the community. When I trained in the UK, whatever I did, ours was about finding home for the homeless in London and other places. And then there was a lot of early intervention work. But as I will demonstrate to you, when we talk about community, and this has been alluded to by other people, we are almost done with conversations around removing people from mental asylums, except for the brilliant conversation that we had earlier this morning. And we really need to start reconceptualizing what community is, so that when we say we are working within our communities, we remove ourselves from the traditional conceptualization of communities. For example, in Kenya, there are communities from the Rik, there are communities from the Vare, and there are communities from Murima. Right? Those are real communities, yes? What binds them is closely held stupidity about themselves. And then there are other communities. Nyumba Kumi is a real community. We, the Sweetie Boys, are a community, and a very real community. And what I want us to understand is that you can actually belong to multiple communities at the same. You can be a Sweetie Boy and at the same time be an academic. You can be a Sweetie Boy and be a member of the community of Alfa Romeo Owners Club. Now, these are the complexities I was talking about, because originally we thought community was a homogeneous concept. It is not. I can belong to multiple. And Dr. Gumbo's presentation about the diaspora makes this point very well, because these are genuine communities, they are ours, and they have very peculiar needs and requirements. So let's look at the vertical communities that we have, by way, for example, and the way they sit one on top of the other, like chapatis. The thing about these communities is that they are completely disrupted. There is no communication between one to the other, literally because of linguistic barriers. So when you say that you have a community from Murima and another one from the valley, and they are not communicating because of language, there is an even bigger problem. My generation has no way of understanding what the Gen Z community is speaking to each other. And very tragically, I would hold, knowledgeable people like myself are now completely useless to the Gen Z community, because I have no way of reaching them. Their main source of information is this Chinese guy called TikTok. All right, that's the only source. I try to make myself useful to them, but because of this hierarchical arrangement, there is no, and that is a serious problem. If you look at the evolution of humankind, grandfathers and grandmothers start to emerge around 30,000 years ago. And they emerge for a very, very, very good reason. They start to emerge to help young mothers and fathers to better look after their little ones. On the horizontal scale, and this is the collision I was talking about, things are, as they say in Kenya, elephant. If you look only at the last 125 years, when the railway line was created, Kenya had 1.7 million people, the territory called Kenya, estimate. Now we know we are 57 million people. And I'll show you a graph just now of the exponential growth of populations globally. Life expectancy, would you believe, global, was 30 years. Today, global is 73 years. Now, don't think about anything else and only think about that change that has taken place. We are problematic. We know a lot, and I'll show you we're also very rich, but we are net consumers of natural resources. We can't go hunting, we can't go planting. Our work is just to take dawas, sindanos, nini. Yeah? And that is a serious demographic shift that is real. You're wondering why I'm talking about M-Pesa. I want you to put up your hand if you have not used M-Pesa in the last 1 month. Anybody who has not used M-Pesa? Okay. Now, What does that tell you? This is a useless thing, 18 years old, yes? And it has transformed the way we do business in this country. So what am I saying? And I will demonstrate this in a little while. That there are very small changes that have incredible impact on society. And when it comes to discussing the way forward, you will see why small changes are what really make all the big difference. Anybody tells you that in Africa we are creating mental health services for the rural poor is telling lies on stilts. It is not true. Over the next 20, 30 years, the rural population in Africa will become finished. And 68% of us will live in urban areas. And so anybody who's conceptualizing future 21st, remember we are only 25 years into this century. By the time we do the next 75, the mental health care services will be for Korogosho, Shaurimoyo, Ofafa Maringo, and other places that belong to city boys like this one. It's not a lay issue. It's a serious issue. Whether you're looking at the movement toward strong men and rulers far to the right, we know them by name, we know what they're doing to global economy, or whether you are looking at political wars that are going on in this, our own continent of Africa. When I went to school many years ago, Nairobi University, we were discouraged from thinking beyond the bedside. And we were told doctors don't think about Jesus, they don't think about politics, they don't think about economics, just give people injections and cure them. In the 21st century, if you're a doctor and you're not thinking about these serious challenges, you're an idiot. There are neglected aspects of care by mental health specialists that we don't talk about. For example, when is the last time, as a registrar, you had a teacher tell you that respecting your patient, giving respect to a human being, a fellow human being, is therapeutic? When is the last time that a teacher told you that having empathy towards those you look after is a therapeutic intervention? We talked about agency yesterday. Agency is not a word. It's a fact that if you give human beings agency, then you are getting... The most interesting study that I know that supports all this that I'm saying is actually a German study on the effect. It's called the rabbit effect. The way to keep rabbits alive is to cuddle them. If you want to kill them, give them a very high fat diet. They will die of heart disease, yes? But if you show them some affection, go Google the rabbit effect. It demonstrates how important it is to have contact from one human being to a rabbit. Who is teaching us the power of silence? My teacher on the power of silence was a guy called Emilio Moi Kibaki. People thought Kibaki was a fool because he didn't say anything. I spent a little bit of time near him, and I could almost hear him saying, when all of you are talking against each other, jinga hawa, jinga nyinyi. What do you think, you know? Because we don't spend any time listening and hearing what our interlocutors are all about. The power of listening. If you are a psychiatrist, it's expected that you like your work, all right? And if you don't like your work, you can go and work in a mortuary. It's very quiet, no noise, no disturbance. It's a great place to be. In 1900, 125 years ago, 13% of the world lived in cities. There were very few. By 2050, all our mental health services would have to be urban-based, because you can't go to some faraway rural place to put up mental health services because there are no people there. They have all moved into the urban areas. And I want to tell you, I am a city boy. That's what my book calls me. One of the things that happen to city life is this thing called loneliness. And loneliness kills. How often do we talk to each other about social capital development deliberately? Our interactions are transactional. And they are transactional because your grandfather and your grandmother are not involved in teaching you the importance of having mutually enhancing and mutually helpful relationship. Yours is a capitalist life existence, where, as Mwalimu Nyerere told us, we live in a society of man eat man. These, for me, are the real issues. Knowing how to diagnose DSM-5 schizophrenia, I don't know what, personality disorders, autism, what, those ones any idiot can learn. The real things that matter in society in the 21st century are the things that get us to express patience and listen to one another. You see, we sit here thinking that KPA started last week. KPA didn't start last week. KPA has been there since '86. And KPA, Mpende Msipende, is a very vibrant and active, futuristic organization that has done a lot. And because, as I said, I am old, and I was there when history was being written, allow me, Rajab, is it okay to tell you a little bit about KPA and your own achievements that nobody's telling you about? Sawa, DSM-5. DSM-5 ya nani? So, this study that I will touch on very briefly was published in World Psychiatry. And this was work done by Rachel Jenkins, who was my schoolmate in London, Okonji, Kigamwa, myself, Kathuku, and Kiima. Is Juguna here? So we were the KPA Secretariat. And I'm saying this, Madam President, so that you can understand that we have friends and cousins. All right, our cousins were from, so we put together the Kenya Psychiatric Association, KMTC, WHO, Nuffield Foundation, and so on, to solve a problem, a community problem. Our view was that the clinical officers, who Ndetei had told us many years ago, treat the majority of patients, were not recognizing common mental disorders. So not me, not Rachel Jenkins, KPA executive together with the membership, we decided to train 3,000 out of the 5,000 clinical officers who existed. Mutiso, you found the tail end of this one? Yes. Yes. So what did we do? We went to London. We were there 9/11, looked at WHA curriculum, domesticated it. In fact, I remember because it was in the day 9/11 happened. So we developed the program, a 5-day program. You've heard of this one. And what did we do? What were we able to ask KPA? That the main change in knowledge core for the first 1,000 participants was from 42 to 77. Now, is that a useful thing? We were able to show, as KPA, that you can actually identify clinical officers, train them for 5 days, and actually increase the level of knowledge at the primary healthcare level. I associate myself 100% with the sentiment of Lukoya Tuoli. This task-shifting maneno is controversial and complicated. We were not task-shifting. We were empowering people to do their job. We had sent clinical officers to the streets without teaching them how to do their job. So that is an important thing. To identify a problem, work within the existing structures, and resolve that matter. embed it in existing structures. That is what this conference is about. Identify a problem as KPA, as members, find a solution for it, and get on with it. Madam President, you've just talked with Dr. Mutiso, and you have told them that as KPA, together with Lynette Ngeri, who is here, we are engaging with another community of people called Christians. Well, that is what I was saying earlier on. Community is community, and it's very broad-based. And what Lynette Ngeri, yourself, and others have decided is that we must speak the language of those communities. So we have developed a curriculum that is suitable to speak to those people. When we go to develop a curriculum for Gen Z, it has to be a communication strategy that arrives at their doorstep via TikTok. So what is the way forward? This idea of innovation is actually a business idea. We started off with a keynote address, which comes from music. This whole idea of innovation and it being beyond inventing something is what we do in business. All right? You just don't invent something. It's about the practical implementation of new ideas. It's a practical implementation of the teaching of clinical officers that KPA has already done. Embed your discoveries in the system as it is, even as you disruptive. And finally, if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. So whatever it is that you're doing must be measurable. You know, climate change is real. We are seeing in our practice people who are climate affected. Floods and drought are as real as they are. I've told you about urbanization. People who are complaining about the Gen Z phenomenon and the political instability and being afraid of it don't understand evolution. Evolution, even in what the Bible calls Adam and Hawa, the way the teenager is programmed by biology is to be experimental, to break boundaries, to go beyond boundaries, to be restless. So you can't complain that our teenagers and our young men and women are restless. It's not them, it's the biology that evolution has given to them. Globalization is a big deal. Just one or two things. If you lived in a little village, can you believe it? 57% of the people of that village would be Asians. That's how many Asians there are in the world. 8 would be you, poor Africans. And 30%, Mutiso, will be Christians. When you look at wealth distribution, and this is the real elephant in the room, 6 own 59% of global wealth, and all of them are Americans. Is that fair? We were told yesterday that about 1 billion people have mental disorders. World Health Report the other day. 1.3 billion people on this world today live on less than $1 a day. Can we say we live in an equitable world where the Americans own 59% of? Is this a legitimate issue or concern amongst the right-thinking citizens of this world? You know, whether you like it or not, even as you treat people with PTSD, and whether it is PTSD that has arisen from people being flooded out, or you're treating people with PTSD because cattle rustlers have come to steal their goats and cows because they have drought on the other side of the Rift Valley, the solution is not to send more GSU. The solution is to act rationally about climate change. I was going to tell you a little bit about how loneliness kills. Time will not allow us to do that. But just take it from me. If you want your mother or your grandfather to die quickly so that you inherit their poverty-stricken farm, just make sure they are lonely. Yeah? Make sure your grandparents, your parents are lonely, they will die very quickly, and you will become very rich indeed. And the physiology around loneliness is very clear. It changes your mitochondria. It has metabolic consequences, and isolation, loneliness breeds more isolation. And that is how my friend is dying. Finally, I told you mine is to talk to you about broad things. I will not talk about Is it a legitimate reason for us to be interested in the mental health of our governors? Is it reasonable for us to worry about the mental health of our senators? And my friend, Jonathan Davidson, would have us believe that 37 of American presidents had a mental illness of one sort or another. Na hapa Kenya je? 70%. Is that a legitimate question? 70% of British prime ministers had a mental illness. And Sir Winston Churchill, a guy I hold in very high regard, in spite of the atrocities visited on us during the emergency, abused alcohol, had bipolar mood disorder. If not you, who else is going to raise issues about higher maneno? Depressed doctors are very harmful to their patients. They increase clinical errors. Should we have any interest on the first 1,000 days of life? Do you have an opinion on postnatal mothers and depression and the rates of which the children have diarrheal diseases? What about adverse childhood experiences? Who cares about that? Is that our business? I told you what I am going to tell you today is not a keynote presentation. It's to give you ideas of what you might want to present to us when you come to Ukunda next year. And please bring your swimsuits, because that is near the ocean. The church, the work that we are doing is not from our heads. It is work that is mandated by the WPA itself. So what have I told you, ladies and gentlemen? I have told you, contrary to the news that you will receive in the streets, we have very good news in this country. We have fundamentals right. We are doing well. And anybody who tells you that this country has no future doesn't know what future looks like. We have a great future as a country. Thanks to all of you. Do we have problems? Of course we have problems. But we can overcome those ones. The second point I have made is that if you don't look at where we have come from, it'll be difficult for you to understand how we got here. And I hope I've convinced you to take a little more interest in the history of your people, so that even as you do strategic plans for the future, you can understand what that future might hold. I've told you about the earthquake that is taking place right in your face today. We have huge issues. The list is very long. And I urge us, rather than run away from these challenges, because most of you are young, and because problems are designed for the solution by young men and women, you have 75 years to do this. So get on with it. And there are low-lying fruits, and there are many. Working with the church, working with the youth, and I have to commend all those people who have presented this morning on the work that they are doing amongst the youth. We were able to demonstrate, part of immediately after the task force, that if you have only $1 to invest in mental health, or actually in anything, invest it in the youth. Remember that study? All right? Investing in mental health of young people has greater returns than roads and dams and infrastructure That is where, and the numbers again were spoken here about why the returns are so big. So continue with the work. And finally, and this is perhaps why this afternoon is so important, fit your own oxygen mask first before you try to help others. The WPA, no, the American Psychiatric Association meeting for this year in May in Los Angeles was about this subject. How do we look after ourselves? Because if we are not looking after ourselves, I put it to you, there is no possibility that we have the capacity to look after other people. And the formula is very simple. It's about what you eat with your mouth, how much sleep, how much movement, how much exercise that you do, and how much you are connected with a higher being. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to move. Thank you.